Hello, Steve Gibbs again, here to pick up the Sage X3 Financials demo, part 2 here. We're going to go through, in this part of the demonstration, AR. We're going to look at bank reconciliations, look at accounts payable, and then a quick introduction to Sage X3 fixed assets. Now, prior to doing that, I just want to kind of walk back through the things that we covered in part 1 of the financials demonstration. We looked at dashboards, including this enterprise dashboard, looked at an AR dashboard, went through financial reports. We looked at how to configure your accounting organization, set up any companies, sites, hierarchies, chart of accounts, GL processes, costing, and closing. Now, since we're in AR, let's go back to this AR dashboard. Remember, no matter what your role, we have standard dashboards like this that you can include on your landing pages. You can use the slicers across the top, in this case, to look at AR for different parts of the organization. Maybe we only want to look at AR for going to North America, US, just for this one company, or maybe just a particular site within that company. So we can make those selections, and the underlying data is updated accordingly. If we've categorized our customers into, like in this case, into different channels or other categories, you can change these views by making selections like we see here with a customer channel. And then in this case, there's just relevant AR metrics like aging information for overdue and current receivables, key metrics like day sales outstanding. So just keep in mind that these type of dashboards can be included on your landing pages from an AR standpoint and an AP standpoint, even fixed assets when you log into X3. So let's go back to AR, take a look at this process map here. Got quick shortcut options to options I access on a very regular basis: sales orders, invoices, managed credit. Expected returns. So we've issued RMAs, but the returns have not yet come back in. So I'll monitor those, because as the returns come in, depending on the situation, I may need to issue credit invoices. So we can do that as part of AR. Sales orders on hold. So maybe I manage credit within the organization. I want visibility into any orders that have come in that have been placed on hold, whether it be due to credit reasons like we're seeing here, or maybe a manual hold, so that I can go in and maybe we extend the customer's credit, and I want to go in and take these orders off a hold. I can do that. Got aging details here on the right, aging by different aging buckets. If I hover over the yellow, these are ones that are due within the next 30 days. Actually, they're 30 days late. Drill down on that. I can now see balances by customer. Go back up. If I want to see this in a report format, I can pick any part of the donut chart or the entire chart and see this data in a report format here, listing every single customer, what do they owe me, with drill down capabilities to the underlying invoices. Last thing here on the AR process map, or the AR landing page, I should say, is we have a process map that helps us manage the process end to end. We can do everything from invoicing. We can auto issue invoices here. We can apply cash. Got a collection section where we can issue past due invoices. Those are all connected into CRM. We'll see that here in the demo. We can do regular customer invoices that are not tied to any particular products, just kind of generic invoices that you may issue. We support recurring invoices as well as intercompany invoices. Now let's jump in and take a look at the customer master record. You've seen this previously, but I want to kind of look at this with a financial accounting lens and just call out some settings here that are relevant from a finance accounting standpoint. I like these short descriptions. If you're tied on real estate on reports, you can use these short descriptions and give you a little more real estate on reports. Language. How do you interact with this customer? If I send the customer an invoice or an order acknowledgement, what language does it need to be in? Default currency. So maybe I transact with this customer in the euro or another currency. You can set a default for that. Roles, very important. X3 supports a business partner concept. So with a single business partner, that business partner may be a customer like we're seeing here, or they may be a customer and a supplier. What does that allow you to do? You manage the relationship as a single relationship, and then you connect the transactions across one another. So maybe the customer owes you more money than you owe them. You connect the transactions against one another. very critical capability from an AP/AR standpoint. Different addresses. Each address that you set up can be defined as a ship to, and then there's the addresses that you can pick when you're doing orders and deliveries. We've got various taxation settings, by the way, at the ship to level too, because taxation is done at the ship to level. Sales reps, commission categories, template codes. This is important. Maybe the customer requires a very specific invoice format. It's your largest customer. My invoice has to look exactly like this. Instead of using kind of a default template, you can override, the template used for, in this case, this specific customer in this field here, and literally produce down to a customer level a very specific invoice format. I don't recommend that unless the customer's demanding it, but I do see it from time to time. Different invoicing modes. How do I invoice the customer? Once per delivery or slip, one invoice per order, one invoice per ship to, one per period, and other settings. If I pick period, I could come in and say, okay, maybe I do invoices to this customer weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or daily. So you can define those settings. The beauty is once you define the invoicing settings, then we're going to let X3 manage the invoicing process for us. We don't have to be out there creating invoices manually. Get the rules right, get the payment terms right, and let X3 manage the invoicing process. Keep scrolling down here, see if there's other relevant fields. These stat groups are very important. We'll use these on reports. User definable, just different groupings. How do I want to categorize my customers for reporting purposes? They can be cascaded. So maybe group 1 is going to define the options that you have under group 2. So you can do kind of a hierarchical reporting of your customers. Maybe you have customers where somebody else pays the bill. Maybe bills are paid on behalf, another entity pays the bills on behalf of the customer. You can define that pay by customer here. How's risk managed? Maybe risk is managed at a corporate level, and that's another customer in the system. Credit card information. We support credit cards, all PCI compliant, stored up in the cloud, powered by a company called Paya, P-A-Y-A. We can connect to other payment systems, but the default would be kind of the standard integration that we have is with Paya, P-A-Y-A, all PCI compliant. Different ship to your addresses. Last thing, bank details. Maybe your customer pays you electronically. You can key the bank details in here, and then by reading a bank file, we could automatically identify who's paying you and create the receipt for you using a bank feed. So you're spending a lot of time creating receipts, figuring out what open items the receipts pay. That can be automated. We'll look at that when we get to bank rec. So let's go ahead and cancel out these modifications here. And we're going to go back to the landing page. And let's go in, just doing a quick time check. We're doing good. Let's go in and we're going to take a look at the invoices screen next. I'm going to go in here, pick this invoice option. First thing I want to introduce you to is a concept in X3 called journal traceability. So I've got some shortcut options set up over here to get to transactions I access on a regular basis. If you want to be able to get to invoices for a particular customer, site, company, you can set up your own shortcuts. So we'll go in, let's look at this transaction here. With journal traceability, what we do is we connect all related transactions together in X3. So just think this invoice may be related to other things like payments or maybe even a sales order. And to see those related transactions, we just click journal traceability and we have access to all those related transactions. So we can get to the journal entry here in GL. Any payment or payments that the customer may have made are listed here, all connected. Maybe I want to go back and see, well, what did the order look like on this? I can go back to, we call them upstream transactions. Just think of one, these are transactions that were created prior to the creation of the invoice that we're looking at. Got access to the delivery record, the pick ticket, order, and even back to quote. What did the initial quote look like? We could access that. So that's journal traceability. It's on the AP side as well. We're looking at it kind of on the AR sales side right now. So let's go in. We're going to do a new invoice. I'm going to click this plus button. Before we actually enter this transaction, the key point I want to make here is that remember, as we saw in the customer record, we can define the invoicing rules for your customers. Once that is done, an automated scheduled job can be run to create these invoices for us automatically. Now I'm going to walk you through the manual process because you may have to, occasionally issue an invoice on demand. And I want you to understand how the process works, but recognize this can be automated, and we're just going to walk through the manual process right now. So let's go ahead and look at what types of deliveries are out there awaiting invoicing. So here's a couple of deliveries for 3 different customers, and we can pick one of these. Let's just pick this last customer on the list, and it brings across, we may need to invoice the customer for 10 deliveries and 100 lines. All those details come across from the shipments that we've made. There's no need to go in and rekey information. Finance here is fully connected to all the deliveries that you've made. And of course, we have access to all the orders that are out there as well. Maybe you have, kind of an order that you need to invoice that doesn't involve a delivery. It's maybe a services-based order. The work's been completed. It's the same concept. So it's pulled across the line. Details like payment terms came from the customer. Customer, of course, came across Williams Distributors. I mean, everything on this is good. I mean, I don't have to change anything. I'm just going to hit create, and my invoice is done. So that's it. Very simple process, typically done automatically. Now, through workflow, I could set X3 up to just automatically send the customer the invoice. Now, I'm going to go through and create this invoice manually right now, or I should say manually email this to the customer, but recognize this could be kind of a scheduled activity as well. So let's go into the print option, and let's get the customer a copy of this invoice. I'm going to go ahead and print this. So what this is generating a workflow process kind of manually through this kind of printing operation that I'm going through. If it's a one-off, you can have this screen pop up where I could add some notes. I could come in here and say customer service, put my name, and then I could put great talking with you today, Susan, or whoever I spoke with, and click OK. Now this invoice through workflow has been sent to the customer. So if we go into the customer's inbox here, let's go ahead and mark everything as red in here to make it easy to find the new one. Send receive. There's the new one that just came in. Great talking with you today, Susan. Looks like I misspelled my name. That's a typo on my part. I've become part of the Bee Gees, I think. I'm actually Steve Gibbs with an S. And then copy the invoice. Now, we need to do some layout changes to get the logo aligned properly. And we'll work with you on the implementation of X3 to get this invoice looking exactly like you would like it to look for your customers. Just recognize we're going to help you with this, train you how to lay these invoices out so that they look exactly like you'd like them to look. You can control the text of the message just as how I typed in here. You can change the default language as well. I've got other things like order acknowledgments. We can thank you for your order. These are configurable as well. So that's the emailing of an invoice, all done with workflow, which basically lives across X3. So if we're sending out delivery notifications, sales order acknowledgments, or in this case, sales invoices, is all powered through the Sage X3 workflow component. So that's the sales invoice. Let's see, one other thing to look at on this screen is I want to go in and look at this transaction called Sage Sales Tax. Sage X3 has 2 options to tax your transactions. We can use the out-of-the-box tax engine, or we can use what we call Sage Sales Tax. That's powered by a company called Avalara, A-V-A-L-A-R-A. So we've white labeled that as a solution called Sage Sales Tax. You'll map your different products that you sell, products and services, to Avalara tax codes, and then based on a combination of that and the ship-to address, and you can also define rules like if the customer is tax exempt, you'll assign that to the customer record. We'll use those parameters to determine the taxation for an invoice. So as an example, here's a sales invoice that was taxed with Sage Sales Tax. Looks like it was $4,006 a product, a few $100 worth of tax. We can come in here, and this was actually a customer with a ship-to in Colorado, Boulder, got a city tax, county tax, a couple special taxes, and a state tax. All done, by the way, with Avalara. In addition to doing taxation, Avalara can manage use tax, and they can also manage tax exemption certificates. So if you have a lot of, maybe taxation isn't a pain point, but managing those tax exemption certificates is, there's a whole process within Sage Sales Tax to manage that, to notify your customers, we're coming up on an expiration date for a tax certificate. That's part of the solution as well. So it has value both for managing certificates and taxation. So just going to check my notes here to make sure I've covered the key things that I want to cover from an invoicing standpoint while we're on the screen. And I think we're done here. So I want to go back to the AR landing page. And I want to talk about one other thing from kind of an invoice ordering standpoint, and that is credit card transactions. If you allow any of your customers to pay by credit card, we've got that integration with the PAYA credit card processing engine, PAYA, and it's all PCI compliant. We don't store any credit card numbers in X3, and this is what it looks like. So if I go into orders here, maybe pick a credit card transaction, go ahead and select that, and go to credit card processing. You can see here I've got kind of the last 4 digits of the credit card number. This credit card number is not stored in X3 and any X3 servers in our database anywhere in X3. There's strictly a connection between X3 and the credit card processing engine, and all the card details are stored up in the cloud. Through the integration, we're able to, this is an order, we're able to get an authorization number. So this particular order was authorized. Upon shipment of the product, we'll go ahead and charge the credit card. Very common. I mean, you may order from a retailer, works the same way. They'll capture your credit card and won't charge you until they ship the product. So that's another option for payments within Sage X3. A couple other things here. Past due invoices. Let's go down to the process map. You can do setup around how you choose to notify your customers from a past due invoicing standpoint. You can define different past due invoicing notification levels. Maybe at 30 days past due, you say, I know we apologize, you probably just misplaced your invoice. By level 5, maybe they're a couple months past due, you're ready to send it to collections and you have stronger language. So you'll define those settings here. Once the settings are defined, you'll go in and produce your past due invoices through X3. We will then integrate all those past due invoices in CRM. So your salespeople aren't blindsided. Salesperson goes out to visit the customer. They have full visibility into these past due invoices that have been sent to the customer, as well as all other correspondence with the customer. So we'll write these past due invoices into the CRM module as tasks. So we go in here, we got some tasks. These tasks have already been carried out. Let's go ahead and find a customer. Here's a customer where we have done a past due invoice campaign. Here's different reminders that we sent the customer. And if we wanted to, remember, this is in CRM. It's tied to the customer here. So there's a relationship between this record and the customer, international distributors, and the sales rep has full visibility into this. We want to actually go in and take a look at that past due invoice that was sent to them. We can go back to the original reminder campaign that was run and even reprint. So we can come in here, we've got a reminder campaign reprint option. We could come in here and reprint. If I'm a sales rep, I want to know exactly what that past due invoice looked like. I could reprint that and take a look at it if I needed to. So that's all through AR and CRM integration that we have within Sage X3. That's past due invoices. Now you can go in, cash application, you can manually enter in your receipts from your customers. Probably the best way is to try to automate that through bank feeds. But if you needed to apply cash manually, you can just click this option. Plus, maybe we've got a receipt in from a customer called International Distributors. Let's try a different site here. International Distributors. And go to open items. So here's all the different open items for this customer. We can check off. Maybe the customer's only paying this one invoice. We could open this up to see what the balance is. We could maybe drag the balance over, make it a little more visible. They're paying us this $380,000 invoice. Check it off, and then simply just hit check here. Maybe give it a check number. They pay me with this check number and create the receipt. So that's the way to do this manually. Maybe they're paying everything. I could check off all the items here. It will add in every invoice that they're paying. So, it's easy to work with, but it's not the most automated way to deal with receipts. So this is the standard cash application process. How can we automate this? So I'm going to go back to the process map, and we're about to pivot to bank reconciliations. Now, before I do this, just wanted to kind of quickly recap what we discussed. We talked about invoicing. We saw how to do that, manually. We discussed how that could be automated. We saw the automated issue of an invoice through email. We looked at a sales order with the credit card payment. We looked at, say, sales tax. We talked about some of the different queries. Remember, if we want to change this landing page, you just hit the plus button. And then I can add different things, different charts, different queries, different process maps to my landing page based on new things that are important to me. And we looked at the past due invoices and a few other things. So let's go ahead and move on to bank reconciliation. Now, with bank reconciliation, we support just the standard bank rec. You've got this transaction from the bank. It matches up with this check that you cut. You pick the two and you match them off, and that's great. In X3, we've got the ability to not only do that, but to take transactions that you may have not yet entered into X3, like maybe that receipt from a customer. It doesn't exist in X3. We're going to go ahead and create that receipt, and then automatically, based on details in the bank file from the bank, apply that against an open item or open items in X3. You'll define rules. That's what all these different options are here. You'll define different segments and settings and how to search on various things. There's just parameters you have to do to help ensure very accurate and high matching rates. You'll get that done, and then you'll import your bank file in. Once the bank file is imported in, it will be matched up against the transactions in X3 to figure out, maybe this is a check that cleared the bank. Maybe this is a brand new transaction that needs to be processed, and they'll show up on this window here. The window is designed where A's have already been matched. These are matches that basically were kind of matched by the matching process. Other things like the B's were partial matches, and you'll have to go in and manage these exceptions. Let's look at one of the perfect matches. Like in this case here, this is a revenue item or receipt from a customer. You'll notice the customer had all these different open items, but the process was able to identify which customer paid you based on the bank account details you had tagged to the customer, as well as details that came through the ACH network that were included in your bank file. So said, okay, I've got a receipt in from this customer. Looks like the customer's Fun Time Stores. And also, Fun Time Stores said, I'm paying this invoice here, so it's plotted against this open item. Is good. I mean, you had the data. There was no ambiguity around how to apply the open item, and it's done. So another A item here that was a match was a payment. So this was actually matched against, instead of an open item, this transaction that went through the bank was matched to a check that you had previously issued. So we could go back and look at this check. We can see this was check number 159, 00159. We can notice that if we scroll down a little, some payment details that were included in the bank file, I had my 00159. So it was able to determine that this payment that cleared the bank was truly check 159. Found that in my check register for checks that had not yet been reconciled and matched it off, and it's done. If you need to, you can go through and kind of manually, if there's transactions in here that were not matched, we'll go through and address these as exceptions. Things like this $2.11, I think this was a interest income. Banks don't pay much in interest income these days, made a couple bucks. I still got to be able to account for it. The system automatically recognized that as interest income based on rules I had set up. That's a bank charge that did the same thing. So that's kind of a high-level view of the bank reconciliation process in X3. And what I'd like to do next is I would like to move on to accounts payable here. So let's go to the accounts payable process. Let's review this process map. We're going to look at invoices. You can do ACH transactions if you pay your suppliers electronically through the ACH network. We support that. We support global payments too. That's done through different legislation packages. We support, the payment networks in other countries if that's a requirement. You do have to own those legislation packages in some cases, but it's an option if you're a multinational company with operations outside of the U.S. Access to our suppliers. A couple queries that are important to me. Any PO match exceptions would show up here. Invoices that I've entered in that haven't been posted, maybe they're awaiting an approval. Maybe it's a non-PO type invoice that needs to be approved. I could put that on this list here. Top 10 suppliers. And then I've got a process map as well. So we've got, we can go in and do invoices. We're going to look at an accounts payable invoice using this option. We can do payment proposals to pay our suppliers. We can pay them by check, ACH, wire, do manual checks if needed. We support positive pay in X3. Other processes, we support just regular supplier invoices for something, maybe you're not buying a raw material or something tied to a PO. You're just basically paying the rent bill. That would be a supplier invoice. Recurring invoices, you got maybe a recurring rent payment that you make every single month. We support that through a recurring invoice. Intercompany transactions and 1099s are also supported. So just like we looked at it on the customer side or on the AR side, we looked at customers. Let's jump in, quick peek at suppliers. You've seen this through the common data overview, but let's just jump in and call out a few relevant things from a finance accounting standpoint. Short descriptions, then again, very great for reports when you're tied on real estate. What currency, maybe you buy from a particular supplier and you transact in a different currency than US dollar, your accounting currency. You could define that their BP concept. Is this supplier also a customer? We talked about that a few minutes ago. Are you buying from different addresses for the supplier? We can maintain as many addresses as we need here. Template codes, probably more on what does the PO form look like for this supplier? So any basically supplier facing documents you would define through this template code here. Remember the stat groups, just different ways to categorize your suppliers. These are user definable. We use these in reporting. Great ways to kind of report. You don't want 1,001 page report of AP purchases. It doesn't really mean anything. 1,000 pages of nothing. But if you take those transactions and aggregate them up and maybe look at purchases over different time periods, you can get meaningful data. And we use these stat groups to help with that. Credit, I think this is a very nice option. I mean, we know credit is important for our customers, but maybe you have a relationship with a supplier that provides an absolutely essential raw material for your business. And if you can't get this raw material, your business will not run. So you may want to manage your relationship. What is your credit limit with respect to specific suppliers to help ensure you're not butting up against any credit limits that exist with your suppliers. A nice option there for critical maybe raw material purchases and suppliers that provide those raw materials. Could be even critical services. I mean, maybe there's critical services that security services that your business requires. Another good example of leveraging that. We do support the 1099 forms. We support the new NEC reporting, which went into effect in 2020 for tax year 2020. Replaces 1099 miscellaneous box 7. So that's, Sage was early on in supporting that compliance requirement, and it's in the product today and was, day one when it first became a requirement. And then I think lastly, bank details. This is where you're going to put, if you pay the supplier through the ACH network electronically, you'll keep the bank details in here. So that's the supplier setup information. Let's go back to the main landing page here. Now let's jump in. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to enter an invoice in, but to get to the screen, I'm going to go ahead and just click on this purchase match exception so that we can look at an invoice that had been entered previously that had a match exception and talk about matching. We click this option. Takes us into a specific invoice. If I scroll down a little, you can see it's been blocked. There's this option to unblock the matching error. After I've researched why was it blocked, how much maybe it was only, maybe our tolerances, we're going to block anything where it's more than a $5, discrepancy between the price on the PO and the price on the invoice. And maybe in this case it was 6. It's not worth chasing the extra dollar. But once I've determined how I want to handle this, I may go back to the supplier and say, send me a new invoice. But when I'm at the point where I need to unblock this, I can with this option. To see why this was blocked, if I go into match results, I can see what line got blocked. So in this case here, this particular product, this line got blocked, and why it got blocked. The invoice net price was 50% more than the price on the PO. And I've only got a 5% tolerance. So there's a 50% variance, but the acceptable tolerance is only 5%. It looks like it got blocked due to the total dollar amount too. If I want to see those details, those matching tolerances, those are set up on this screen. And this is where I can go in and define my matching tolerances, not only for invoices, which is this tab, but also for receipts. So you'll define the different tolerances. If I hit a tolerance, does it block the transaction, or maybe it's just a warning? You know, maybe the price is under the PO price. And at that point, I just want to be warned. I don't want to block it. And they're telling me to pay a little less than on the PO. Maybe in that case, it's just a warning. So this is where you'll define those matching tolerances. Get back to the invoice screen here. I'm going to go ahead and open this up so that we can see all of our invoices off to the left here. We can look at journal traceability here too. Remember I mentioned when we were on the AR side, the journal traceability lives throughout X3. So in this case here, if we pick this transaction, we can see how this invoice is related to other transactions in the system using journal traceability as well. So this invoice that I paid to some vendor or supplier is connected to these transactions over here. It's connected to a payment that we made to the supplier, and I can access the payment here. It's connected to a fixed asset. So in this case here, I actually bought a fixed asset, and if I want to go back in and actually look at this fixed asset record, I can check this option here and go into fixed assets if I wanted to. And maybe I'm looking at this purchase going, who in the heck, approved this purchase? Who put this purchase request in? I've got access to those documents here through the upstream option, even back to the purchase request. We could go in and take a look at the purchase request. Oops, looks like I was the one that requested this one, but we may want to reach out to whoever approved that through the signature history here on the right-hand side of the screen. So that's journal traceability. So anything, go back to where we started, we were on the invoice here, anything related to this invoice transaction, the purchase request, the purchase order, the receipt, is all connected through journal traceability. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and create a new invoice. We'll go ahead and hit the plus option. You can categorize your invoices using what we call types. So I just got kind of a direct purchase invoice type set up for the demo. You'll define those. And then I've got the invoice sitting in front of me, and this is an invoice. Maybe it's a PDF that I've got open on another monitor. This invoice is from a company called Mitsu Manufacturing. So if I just type in MIT, get the focus in that field. So MIT finds any suppliers with that name, and here's the supplier I'm looking for, Mitsu Manufacturing. I got the invoice. I'm able to see. Let's go in and look at what receipts we've received. They've invoiced me. I'm assuming I've got some receipts. I do. I can expand each individual receipt and find the appropriate line. So it looks like maybe they invoiced me for this line and this line. I do need to go ahead and take the invoice number from the document, from the invoice document. Maybe this is invoice A123, whatever the number is, I'll type that in. And also I need to verify, on the lines that the amounts are correct. These came from the PO. These all look good. They match up with the prices on the invoice. And then just as a final control, we do require, this is actually it's a parameter, I've got it turned on to require that a control total from the invoice be entered to make sure I don't want to accidentally pay an invoice for more or less than what is on the invoice, and I want to make sure that my matching rules come into play if needed. So we'll type in the amount from the invoice, $284.96, and we'll save the invoice off. So then again, just like we saw on the AR side, heavily integrated in with the operation side of the business. In this case, we have visibility to all the purchase orders. We have visibility to the receipts. Everything's connected through journal traceability. There's no rekeying. We got 100 receipts in from the supplier. It's just a matter of checking those off on the left side of the screen. All those details will flow through, starting with the data on the PO, and of course leveraging the information based on what you have received. So the PO now is ready to be included. Typically at this point, you could have an automated posting approval posting process run. If there's no matching exceptions, the PO has already been approved. Usually at this point, the invoice, everything's matched. It's more of a formality. We do support non-PO invoices. So in those cases, they're not tied to POs. There would typically be a separate approval process, and we would turn on the signature capabilities for those type of invoices. That's absolutely supported in X3, and that's just for a non-PO invoice. So let's go back to the screen. The next topic I want to talk about are intercompany transactions. Now, in X3, we support a couple different types of intercompany transactions. We got the case where you're just paying maybe a utility bill and you're going to expense parts to different companies. That's one type of a intercompany transaction that we support. We also support intercompany buying and selling. So maybe one area of the business, one company, manufactures intermediate or raw material that's used by another area of the business. Well, there's two different entities that are all part of one larger company can actually buy and sell either at cost or at specific prices that you define. You can define transfer pricing that comes into play when transactions are being processed between two companies. The great thing about X3 is we support those types of transactions, keeping track of all the shipments and the receipts and the sales transactions that go along with that, and the invoicing transactions, both on the sales and the purchasing side. We can really cut down the volume of those transactions in half. What will happen is if we look at, let's go ahead and take a look at a purchase order here. So we'll scroll down, go into the purchase order screen. And we can scroll down to intercompany buy sell. Let's go ahead and pick this PO transaction. We'll notice this flight is an intercompany transaction up here. So I've got this particular company buying material from another company. So it's a true intercompany transaction. It looks like they're buying some sort of a memory component. Maybe the one company manufactures final servers, but they buy memory from another company within the organization. This particular transaction, when it was processed, when this PO was created, so the company that needs the memory from the other company would create a PO saying I need X amount of memory, and upon creation of the PO, it would automatically create a sales order in the other company. So the company that is selling me the memory, so I would say I need this memory, and the other company would basically get a sales transaction automatically set up in their system. So when I create my PO for the memory, that sales transaction is set up for the other company, and it's an order that can be fulfilled. So we can go into sales orders here and see that sales transaction. So for the company that manufactures the memory, here's their sales transaction, the memory that they're going to sell me, and then basically this will be an order that can be fulfilled. They can go through the full delivery transaction. They can basically then invoice me. Once they invoice me, that will create an AP transaction in my system automatically. And it's a fully automated process with everything connected. So really, the key thing here is it can cut your transactions in half, keep track of all the intercompany shipments and receipts. You can see what's in transit. You can see here how for this intercompany transaction, the PO was connected to the sales order through this option that we just looked at. That's kind of a high-level view of an intercompany buy-sell transaction in Sage X3. Last thing I wanted to talk about is we do support, landed costs. So if you're buying, maybe your raw material overseas and there's tariffs and shipping charges that could come in from different suppliers, but you want those costs to be captured in your cost for that raw material, fully supported in Sage X3 through our landed cost capabilities. So what you'll do is I have a product set up here on this tab for sugar. And as part of sugar, I defined some relationships. Maybe I buy sugar from a couple different suppliers. And each supplier, depending upon, maybe I buy from one supplier in one country and another supplier in a different country, those additional landed costs can vary based on who the supplier is. But for this supplier here, this AgriFresh supplier, I've defined a default set of landed costs through this field here called cost structure. So now if we go in and we further look at these costs, you can see there's a packing charge and a loading charge and a customs charge, insurance charge, defects charge. Any of these charges literally at the line level, I can make a determination as to whether this charge needs to impact the costing for this sugar product. And if it does, when I do POs for this product, it's going to, and ultimately do a receipt, the receipts are going to reflect these charges based on all the details of these cost structures that I've set up. So maybe the default customs charge is a flat $100. That cost will go into the cost of the product. Then when these extra charges come in, like maybe a customs charge, let's say it's $105, we will manage that $5 as a variance, and we'll give you full reporting around that. So it's really a great way to help kind of keep your costs consistent, avoid large fluctuations for your landed costs, give you a reconciliation process on those costs. The cost details are defined as we see here at the item supplier level. And you set this up and let X3 manage this and let you kind of manage the exceptions and help you with your landed cost processes. So let's go back to, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. Going to go back to the accounts payable process map. I think the very last thing I wanted to cover here is, and it's just really just more of a quick note, we do support those ACH payments, and I haven't clicked on this option yet. So if I click on this, this would be a case where for the type of payment, in this case ACH payments, I'm able to create a bank file. This is where we would create that ACH file for you to send to your financial institution, your bank, to pay your suppliers electronically through ACH. So that concludes the AP portion. We've got one last, just doing a quick time check here. I got a few minutes left. We're going to do kind of a quick high-level view of fixed assets now, but that concludes the AP piece. We've looked at the invoices, discussed landed costs, we've discussed matching, reviewed the supplier screen. We've talked about intercompany transactions through, like I said, the intercompany buying and selling. And, there's various reporting options here too. I haven't gotten into these, just like we saw on the AR side, we have aging reports on the AP side, different reports around closed and open items. Just a quick view and just some of your top suppliers, good variety of reports from an AP standpoint as well. So let's go ahead and move on to fixed assets. Fixed assets, relatively simple process map here, quick shortcuts to add or view or update fixed assets. Physical assets, so what this is we keep track of things like serial numbers, maybe a barcode number. We can keep track of kind of the geolocation, where was the asset last inventory. We separate that out because, maybe from a accounting standpoint, you have one depreciable asset, but there's, maybe you bought 3 computers and you just depreciate it as one depreciable asset, but you have 3 computers to keep track of. So in that case, you'd have one asset with 3 physical assets. So, that's the reason they're kind of separated out in X3. We do support CIP, construction in progress. So if you've got assets that you're, purchasing as part of maybe a new building or a new site build out, we can track those to a CIP account. And then when you open up the building, you can put everything into service at a specified point in time. So we support CIP. Fixed assets is very tightly integrated. We're going to see some of this, and it's integrated in with GL, as you would expect. We send all the journal entries to GL. We integrate with AP and purchasing. So if you buy a fixed asset, it flows into, it comes from AP or purchasing, and it flows right into fixed assets. A couple other kind of non-standard integrations that we have that you may not find in every ERP system. We integrate with AR. Where's that come into play? Well, if you sell a fixed asset, We can create an invoice in AR to keep track of the sales proceeds. So you maybe sell an asset for $10,000. We'll create the invoice. Then when the payment comes in for the sale, you have an invoice to apply that $10,000 cash receipt against. So that's where we tie into AR from a fixed asset standpoint. And then lastly, there's great integration with inventory. So you can set inventory items up for things like spare parts. And then as you utilize spare parts, if they meet certain criteria, maybe they're of a certain dollar amount that you want to capitalize, you can issue items out of inventory and have those flow straight into fixed assets. So it's a great, even if you use an external, kind of a maintenance system, as long as you can send us those transactions, those issuances of spare parts, we could take that, those spare parts that are living in inventory and put those into fixed assets through that process. So let's go ahead and take a look at a fixed asset. I'm going to go into asset management here. Got an asset screen. We've got, site, description, other details. Let's go ahead and create a brand new one. So we're going to go ahead and hit the plus button here. Go into capitalize. What we have here is a listing of any transactions, like invoices that have been created for fixed assets that are ready to be set up in fixed assets. You'll notice I got some spare parts coming out of inventory. It looks like I bought a piece of heavy equipment, a Bobcat, that was on an invoice. So I can go ahead and check that off. Go ahead and hit apply. And what will happen is all the details. What was the amount of the purchase? What did I buy? Maybe I coded it to a particular, maybe an equipment fixed asset account, who the supplier was, the PO number. All those details will flow through to fixed assets. Quantity was one. Looks like it did come across as equipment. The $59,000 here came in from the invoice. You can set rules up to automatically. It actually came in as a fixed asset in service. This is not construction in progress. I could look at, different allocation rules around, maybe this is an asset for a cost center. Typically, then again, if the purchase was done for a cost center, this would have come in from AP, but maybe that was, somebody forgot to set that up. Maybe this is an asset for the IT department. I can pick that off. Depreciation details. These can be automated based on the type of property that you're purchasing. Or, in this case here, I haven't set up any defaults. I can just pick the appropriate depreciation method. Like in this case, we'll just say it's a straight line depreciation, 5 years. And then the convention, we'll say it's a monthly depreciation convention. If I had X3, fixed assets can track multiple books. So if you have, other books like tax books, they would show up here as separate rows. For the demo here, I only have one set of books. Other information, all these fields are user-defined fields. So free section 1, I can use these lookups, these numeric fields here, these date fields for any purposes that I'd like. Maybe this is the next, basically major service of this piece of equipment. The next service date is going to be 3/31 of this year. And in that case, I would probably change the free date 1 to say, next service date. So these are out-of-the-box user-defined fields that you can use in any way that you'd like. We've already got, probably 75 other fields, but there could be specific fields that you need, and you can use these free-form fields for those purposes. I don't know if I've got a couple of things in this lookup here. You'll be able to define these pick lists, by the way. So for free section 1, maybe this is the employee that owns the asset. You would populate this list with the employees, and you would pick it from that list. Once everything looks good, I'm not going to activate the asset. I'm going to have somebody else kind of review it. Go ahead and hit create, and the asset has been created. And once I activate it, it would be ready to be depreciated. Now, any assets that had, if I'd set up some assets previously, that maybe came from, purchasing, I've got the journal traceability here, so I can go this direction too. So from the asset all the way back to, say, a purchase request, we've got that on the fixed assets. Some nice shortcut options over here to look at disposed assets, inactive assets, different options over here if I need to transfer assets from one location to another, dispose assets, vehicle settings are available on the right-hand side of the screen here. If I need to impair an asset, I've got options for that. Maybe you need to split an asset. Maybe it was, 3 computers, but I want to split it out into 3 assets. That's what you'll use this split feature for. Let's go back to the main page. Once I start depreciating my assets, all those depreciation entries are going to show up under accounting entries. So let's look here. Let's see if we can find some depreciation entries here. So here's some depreciation entries for a particular company. Let's see if we can find another set of depreciation entries. So here's the depreciation expense. If we scroll down, we can see the specific assets that were depreciated in this particular depreciation run. And then these are all the different, this is, depreciation expense, the debit. But, instead of just a $366, I've got the breakdown of exactly how much expense was depreciated on each asset as part of this run. And these are these details down here. And then basically I've got full details around, the journal entry. I can actually drill back and look at the journal entry in GL if I need to. So any type of, setting up a new fixed asset, selling an asset, transferring an asset, we need to do a journal entry to move the asset from one location to another. All those journal entries will show up here under this section, and they're accessible, stored as permanent history in the fixed asset system. So last thing here, physical assets, we talked about that a little. This is where you can kind of keep that record of a physical asset, like a piece of equipment, maybe a computer, where was it last inventoried. We do support a reconciliation through a mobile device. So you can take an inventory of your fixed assets through a mobile device. Just standard app that works with X3. Go around, using your phone, you'll basically scan the barcode, and then we'll keep track of the physical location, the geolocation of that asset, and that will be tagged to this physical asset record. So we know the exact last time it was inventoried and where it was. Let's go ahead and take a look at an asset. So this is a server. We can see things like, the order number. Here's the barcode that I scanned, the serial number, different movements. If this is moved from one location to another, all that history would be stored here. If there were a picture of the asset, I could have attached that. The geolocation information here, click this. And I think we can collapse this side of the screen. So right here, this address here was the last address at which this asset was located. So when I went around, took an inventory of all my assets, the geolocation was tracked as part of that process, and here it is on a map. Up here we've got some details around, the last time the asset was identified from a reconciliation standpoint. Those are stored as well. And then just like we saw the free fields on the asset screen, we've got an equal number of free fields here that are tracked as part of the physical assets in Sage X3. That's a quick overview of fixed assets. A lot more to it. I've spent 90 minutes going through the details of fixed assets before, but today's demo is kind of a high-level demo of fixed assets, just an introduction to it, covering off on the integration pieces. And this actually concludes the demonstration today. So just as kind of a recap, hopefully what you've seen throughout the financials demonstrations here is that the financials are very tightly integrated in with the operational areas of the business: receipts, shipments, manufacturing, everything you manufacture, all those labor costs, machinery costs, are going to flow into your financials. So it's one ERP system with a tightly integrated set of financials. It's a system set up that's going to give you room to grow. You may not need the multi, every part of that. The parts that you don't need are going to help future-proof your business. Highly personalizable. I've got stuff that's missing here that I need to add. Remember, I got the plus button. Just click the plus button, go in. I change my views as needed. And then we got better visibility to help us manage by exception. If I'm looking for sales orders on hold, right here, front and center, I can manage my items by exception. So we started here in the enterprise dashboard for these two sections. We'll go back to here. Last thing, great insights into the business to help drive better decision making. That concludes part 2 of the financials enablement demo series. Hopefully you found this useful. Please reach out to me if you have questions. Steve.Gibbs@sage.com. And thank you again very much for your time.